Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our second session. This session will be hosted by Asima Silva. She's an elected official for the town of Holden as a member of the school committee and chair for diversity, equity, and anti-racism. She graduated from Worcester. How do you pronounce that? Worcester? Worcester, okay. Polytechnic Institute with a master's in computer science and is a software engineer. She also co-founded Enjoying Good to follow her passion for outreach and interfaith activities. Asima is also sits on the board of the Muslim Caucus of America. She is an avid volunteer and supporter of Justice for All, the Burma Task Force, and we welcome her here to the Genocide in Burma conference. Thank you so much, Asima.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me moderate. I'm always excited to moderate such an interesting topic. We all get a chance to learn and all get a chance to reflect on some of these perspectives that are going to be shared today. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our first panelist. One thing to note when I'm introducing these panelists is very rarely do we have on such an important topic that's regarding genocide, regarding such atrocities, but getting all three of these panelists having a woman's perspective, not only with their expertise, but having a woman's perspective is what I am looking forward to hearing from today. So introducing the first panelist is Ranit Mishori. She's a professor of family medicine at Georgetown University School of Medicine and a director of the department's global health initiatives. She's a practicing family physician whose scope of practice includes inpatient and outpatient care to all ages. She's a former journalist, and she has built a multidimensional career that includes academia, scholarship, clinical care, mentorship, and leadership roles in public health, global health, and medical education, the cure of undeserved populations, and human rights. Dr. Mishori provides technical guidance on PHR's curriculum development trainings in our mobile app, Medicapt. She's a champion of migrant health for the past 2 decades through intensive engagement in various activities, including clinical care of refugees and asylum seekers in the primary care setting, documentation of human rights violations affecting forced migrants domestically and abroad, education and scholarship on these issues. She has been the forefront of international and national discussions on the health consequences of forced migration and associated human rights issues. Her specific areas of interest and expertise include FGMC and forensic evaluations of asylum seekers, torture survivors, and survivors of sexual violence. Dr. Mishori graduated from the Georgetown University Providence Hospital Family Medicine Residency. She received her medical degree from Georgetown University School of Medicine and a master's degree in international health, disease control and prevention track from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Mishori has been a member of the PHR's Asylum Network since 2006, and has served as an expert consultant to PHR's program on sexual violence in conflict zones since 2011, and has served as a faculty advisor to Georgetown University's Asylum program since its inception in 2014. I can't be more proud and honored to be introducing you. Please share some of your thoughts on this particular issue regarding the genocide and war crimes in Burma. And I believe you have about 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, Asima. What I'm going to do is share my screen for 1 second. Hang on a moment. All right. So what I want to bring to the conversation today, and can you just thumbs up if you can see my slides? Okay, perfect. I want to bring the aspect of a human rights investigator into this conversation and talk a little bit about what we at Physicians for Human Rights have done in terms of documenting what's been going on in Myanmar and also to Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. So I'll just give you a little bit of a taste of what it's like to do these kinds of investigations that we later hope to be able to use the findings as in justice mechanisms. So Physicians for Human Rights has documented violations against human rights, against Rohingya and other minorities in Myanmar for many, many years, for more than 15 years. And these are just some of the reports that you can find on our website regarding some of the findings that relate to violence and persecution and unlawful land confiscations and other such atrocities. I'm going to start and focus a little bit more on what happened in 2017. We sent multiple teams to the area throughout the year, and one of the first studies that we've done in 2017 was looking at various hamlets in Myanmar, in Rakhine State, and what we did is our investigators interviewed leaders of multiple hamlets to document what's been going on there. So they did surveys and they also spoke to them and did in-depth interviews. And what we found was that very, very consistent and reporting of violence against the local populations. We have found, oops, hang on one second. We have found evidence through the surveys and the interviews about destruction of all kinds of Rohingya hamlets, homes, mosques, fields that were burned. Again, this is not new, but this is one way of documenting such atrocities is through these surveys and interviews. We have documented from these leaders instances of violence that was committed against the population that included sexual violence, gang rapes, people being shot, people being beaten or injured, landmine injuries, and all of these were put together and perpetrated according to our interviews by state actors. Again, you can see the different perpetrators according to the people that we've interviewed. This, of course, led to the situation in 2017 where we started getting reports of additional massacres, burning of villages, false expulsions, and of course, mass sexual violence, and which is what also contributed to the burning of villages. And these are some satellite documents and photos that also assisted with the evidence of what's been going on in Rakhine State. Of course, this all led to the influx of more than 700,000 Rohingya from the state across the border into Bangladesh, in which the former UN High Commissioner on Human Rights called a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Multiple PHR teams went to Bangladesh to try to document what's been going on with and through conversations and documentation of the local refugees who came across the border. And I happened to be one of the members of the various teams, and I'm going to share some photos that we have taken during that visit, starting in October 2017 in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. We have talked to people who have suffered all kinds of injuries and documented their injuries, such as this man who you can see on his left shoulder a gunshot wound, scar, and that helps document his story of what happened to him. This is an X-ray of shrapnel in a pelvis of a survivor, again, helping corroborate the stories of that we heard from the refugees who fled Myanmar. This is one of our team members measuring a scar, again, to help document what's been going on. And we also listened to stories. We asked them to recount what had happened to them. And part of what we heard in the stories are patterns of what the perpetrators allegedly had done that caused this mass influx into Cox's Bazar. We heard stories that talked about the organization execution of the attacks, again, patterns of this from multiple people, about the purposeful destruction of homes and villages and livelihoods, again, not just from one person, but multiple people kind of documenting these patterns. We heard about denied and inadequate healthcare in Myanmar of the survivors. And of course, we also documented additional exam findings and physical findings of the actual physical injuries. We heard stories and saw evidence of injuries from projectiles such as gunshot wounds. And this is an X-ray of somebody who was shot in the back of the leg. Again, this is pretty horrific, but helps build the case for what had happened there. Additional evidence of blunt force trauma, such as beatings, penetrating trauma from knives, machetes, and other sharp objects, burns, for all these stories about villages being burned and what happened to people who had to flee, sometimes on foot. And of course, some of these evidence of sexual violence, but that we can't necessarily take pictures of, but we can document through testimonials from women and other survivors of sexual violence. So, you know, this is a very, very, very quick summary of what happened, but why is this important when we do this, when we do these kinds of documentations? Is it's in order for us to bring all of this evidence together and show and provide evidence of the allegations of something being systematic and widespread. So we can show stories from 40 or 60 or 100 people and say, listen, this is not just something that happened just, you know, one day to one person, but show specific patterns to help build a case for, you know, evidence of crimes against humanity or evidence of genocide or other forms of systematic abuse. And if you want to read more details of those specific visits and that specific investigation, this is a study that we published in a journal called Conflict and Health. Right now, Physicians for Human Rights is engaging in another study of healthcare workers who worked in Cox's Bazar in 2017 after the influx of the Rohingya refugees. And we're documenting the experiences of what happened to the survivors through what the physicians saw, physicians, nurses, midwives, and other health professionals. We're collecting this information not only to get, again, additional corroboration of what happened, but also to look at how and what happened once they arrived in Cox's Bazar, and think about how the system, whether the system was ready or not, to get them and to serve them and to provide all of the needs. So what comes next? So there are a lot of things we can do with this kind of information and other forms of data to build a case, but we certainly need to act. We need to build public awareness, and some of these slides that I'm sharing, some of these reports are specifically and uniquely prepared to raise awareness, to make sure that there's greater knowledge of all the range of crimes that were committed, including the use of sexual violence, to enhance the understanding internationally and the consensus of the gravity of what had happened in Myanmar prior to the hundreds of thousands of people going into Cox's Bazar. All of this also is helping us create advocacy activities, whether on a interstate situation inside the United States with multilateral organizations, and of course events such as this, where we bring together actors and advocacy organizations. Of course, accountability is incredibly important. We're calling for a formal acknowledgement by the Myanmar by government of crimes committed by the military. We want to bring awareness and raise the issue of accountability through international or domestic sanctions and prosecution of those who were complicit in the crimes that we help document. We want to suggest that there's an increase of codification of international human rights law. And of course, we want to make sure that ultimately this accountability leads to a situation where these types of crimes are not repeated. And lastly, we can't do this without focusing on the survivors. So there are multiple ways towards justice for the survivors through creation of criminal justice processes for them, through reparations, through formal and informal processes to support the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities to promote the justice that they deserve and that they seek, and also domestic measures within the country to ensure that there's equal rights to the Rohingya and all other minorities and also to make sure that the people who are suffering and who've suffered will have the services, whether it's mental health services or long-term disability services, to address their needs based on what had happened to them. So this is just a very, very brief overview of what we're doing, and I'm going to be happy to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't say enough of how much some of those slides made a difference in understanding. I mean, I've listened to so many numbers and statistics of the atrocities, but some of those pictures of that, especially that X-ray with that leg broken in half, thank you for really, formalizing and maybe helping us internalize exactly what's going on there and the atrocities that are being done and the way you're documenting it. For our next speaker, we have another great panelist. Ms. Sharifah Shakirah is the founder of director of the Rohingya Women Development Network, which is the first Rohingya women's group in Malaysia and was founded in December 2016. It is self-funded and aims to empower women by harnessing their abilities and providing them with opportunities to be leaders. This is done by organizing classes for women consisting of general education, education on sexual reproductive health, as well as Quran reading, amongst others. In 2019, she was nominated as Malaysia's candidate for the U.S. Department State's International Women of Courage Award. The award is presented by the U.S. Department of State to acknowledge women around the world who have shown courage and leadership in advocating for peace, justice, human rights, gender equality, and women's empowerment. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, please share us with your perspectives, and you have about 7 minutes.
Sure. First of all, thank you and assalamu alaikum, everyone. The previous speaker have given us the brief understanding of what's happening, and I would like to touch on issues, what happened when they left the country, Myanmar. So because of the discriminatory policies from Myanmar, it had caused thousands of, hundreds of thousands of Rohingya to flee from the country to seek refuge, safe haven in the neighbors countries, including Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. So while they was trying to flee from the country, these people are subjected to trafficking and exploitation. So even me by myself, being as a young age, traveling from the country to save, to save a safer place in other countries is tough, especially for the young girls, young females who have been raped, tortured, killed by the traffickers while they are entering to another country. They have to put their lives in a danger. They have to go through the jungles. They have to go through the jungles, and it's tough. In my work experience, I have seen many young girls as young as 11 years old who got pregnant with the trafficked child. She doesn't know who's the the father of the child, and these young girls forced to marry whoever willing to marry them because they have no money to pay the traffickers. There are many young women who told me that their friends who come with them was killed in the journey, was tortured. So there's a lot of abuses that happen especially to the young females, in a hope that there will be a safer place out there. Unfortunately, coming to the neighbor countries, there is always a way of refugees are not recognized in the regime. Their status is not being recognized. So it makes their lives become more difficult. Of course, it's safer. You could sleep in peace, but you have no worry that someone will knock your door and then rape you and kill you. But there is totally different struggles and challenges that Rohingya refugees face in the country. Yes, there is a humanitarian understanding from the publics in the country, and help them with the food assistance or medical assistance sometimes. But these refugees are not legally recognized. So therefore they are not able to work, they are not able to access to healthcare, education, and it's make their lives very difficult. And because of that as well, these refugees again being exploited by the authorities, by the employers. There are many young men that I know, especially in Malaysia, because I grew up there and I live half my life over there. Is that they work so hard in a contraction site, and they work for months, and in the end they don't get paid by the by the employers. They get cheated. There are many young men that I also saw a scene that they fell down from the buildings, they lost their life. Some of them, become handicapped, they lost their legs, hands. um, that's it, then, and these men end up to feed, to survive, they have to end up in a street for begging. And there is no one to, there is no, it's difficult, right? And these people have to also depend on daily wages. They are doing dirty, dangerous jobs that locals are not willing to do. But yes, there are help from the publics. There is a humanitarian understanding, even though these people are not formally recognized. I mean, there is a chance for them to live, but I believe that it is important for the nations, for the countries, to recognize them. Uh, their humanitarian ground as a legal, legal way of giving them at least refugee status, and able to work, allow them to work, allow that kids to study, and able help them access to the healthcare. So I think we have to. I think the government, the countries have to see these refugees as a, not as a burden, but as a contributor to the society, to the country. And because refugee can contribute a lot. Like you have mentioned just now, I represent Malaysia. I mean, I never thought, it will happen in an international platform representing Malaysia, being a refugee. Even I'm not recognized a refugee over there. It shows that, we can contribute to the countries that we live. And yeah. And some also, because it's not recognized, and there's always a lot of misunderstanding about refugees in the country. Like in, there's always there's a hate campaigns against Rohingya. There is a xenophobia attack, treatment, discrimination is already exists there. So it's tough. And in Bangladesh, the internet's been banned. This Rohingya doesn't already have no access, to their friends, to their family, to the outside world, what's happening to them. These people are waiting to return home. They are waiting for the international community, they are waiting for the international justice. But yet there is no hope. They don't know what's happening. It's frustrating. And it's help. There is a lot of trauma, a lot of mental health that going on, within the Rohingya community because of all these struggles. But these people do not understand the mental health issue, because it is, I mean, it is very new in our community, about this. So I think as the there is a lot of things have to be done, honestly, in the region for the Rohingya community. And I think the region, the country also need to understand, the people in the country also need to understand that by recognizing Rohingya, as a refugee, or giving them access to healthcare, or allow them to live with their own livelihoods, allow them to be part of their country, it will not make any of them a citizen of the country. And we Rohingya, wherever we are in Bangladesh or in Malaysia or in India, we want to go back, we want to return home, and we urge the countries, to pressure the Myanmar government in any ways, in any form. And there is already hope with the ICG court, and I urge these countries also, come in hands to support our cause, and so that we can return home. And yeah, and there should be a durable solution for the short term while we can return home as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a great perspective. I think we have a great line of panelists. Our first panelist, Dr. Mishori, gave us an overview of all the atrocities, and Ms. Sharifah Shakirah just gave us a great overview of the actual victims and what's happening on the ground. And our third panelist, I believe, is going to give us a great another perspective of when it comes to civil rights and law. So our third panelist is Anurimah Bhargava. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Is a civil rights lawyer with extensive experience in various roles advocating for members of underrepresented communities. Before founding Anthem of the Us, where she currently serves as president, she was the chief of the Educational Opportunities section of Civil Rights Division at the U.S. Department of Justice, where she led the division's efforts to provide equal educational opportunities for all students. She served on numerous task forces and working groups, including at the White House. And before joining the Justice Department, she served as Director of Education Practice at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. And she also worked at the New York City Department of Education and clerked in the Southern District of New York. In addition to all of this, she served as a fellow at the Open Society Foundations at Harvard University. And before that, she worked in India assisting women elected to local government. She earned a law degree at Columbia Law School and graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College and was born and raised in South Side of Chicago. She was appointed to the commission on December 11, 2018 by Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi for a term ending on May 19, 2020. Thank you so much. Could you share your perspective? You have another 7 minutes.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank the previous panelists because I think in many ways they've laid out so well what led to and what the current conditions are in the camps, both in Cox's Bazar, but also those who are internally displaced within Burma and continue to be facing a number, extraordinary brutality and restrictions in those camps as well. I'm coming to this work as the vice chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, and my colleague Nadine Mienza was on the opening panel this morning. And at the commission, we monitor incidences of where there is persecution of religious groups and where religious freedom is threatened, and hold countries accountable by making recommendations to the United States government, to its Congress, the administration, and to the president about places where there have been continuing atrocities with regards to religious groups. And so Burma has been what we call a country of particular concern, where there has been systematic, ongoing, and egregious violations of religious freedom for 20 years, and we have made a number of trips to the region to try and engage on, in particular, the religious freedom issues. And our mandate is really to look at religious freedom and not the wide range of issues that are coming up and that have been documented in this conversation already. But certainly, we heard from women, children, families, and communities about so much of the violence that has been endured. And I agree with you, Asima, that the Dr. Mishori, the way in which you laid out what has occurred and some of the evidence of that in terms of how widespread and systematic it has been was really helpful. I was able to travel to both Burma to meet with government officials and with community leaders, with Rohingya leaders, back in June of last year. And I also went and visited the camps in Cox's Bazar. And so I speak somewhat from in a very limited way. So I speak somewhat from that experience and certainly from our efforts to try and raise the level of education awareness and concern. And then, of course, action with regards to what's happening. So I wanted to highlight a few things which I think are important for this conversation. That I'm going to talk just in part because it's my charge on this call to talk about what's happened with religious freedom, but want to talk a little bit more broadly about what we definitely saw. And so, as Dr. Mishori already talked about, during 3 years ago, when and frankly for years before that, we've seen Burma take pretty extraordinary actions towards Muslims around across Burma. And that means that that there was everything from government authorities and mobs shuttering and destroying mosques, preventing Rohingya from worshiping or attending school, interfering with funeral rites, desecrating and burning Qurans, targeting imams for detention, torture, and killings. And so that is the context in which we saw many people being open to, being targets of the kind of religious violence and brutality from the last many years, and we see that continuing in Burma for those Muslims who are still within communities across the country, and certainly for the Rohingya that are in the internally displaced camps in Rakhine State and elsewhere. And I'd like to say that I think in some ways Burma has been a place that has shown the ways in which online disinformation and hate can really be disseminated. We saw the role of Buddhist monks, of government authorities in really disseminating hate against Muslims, against religious communities. And that's something that we have been continue to be concerned about. And we'll be holding a hearing in this October to really talk about the ways in which hate has been disseminated and through Facebook, in particular in Burma and Bangladesh, where Facebook is so much of what people look to as the internet, and even where we've seen internet restrictions, that hate continues to grow and fuels the difficulties that so many communities have had in the ability to even contemplate return or a safe place in which they can actually be in community. And so with regards to the camps themselves, obviously I went last year right at the end of Eid, and obviously Eid just ended not so long ago now. And I think in some ways we have not heard that many complaints about the ability to worship within the camps, particularly in Cox's Bazar. There have been mosques and materials and trained imams, and the community has not faced the kind of violence that they face within the confines of Burma previously. I do want to note and have some pictures I may share that there is a small group of Hindus that are also in a separate Hindu camp in Cox's Bazar. There's 445 or around 110 families, and they have been there for the duration as well. And so we do see some different religious communities within Cox's Bazar, and I think it's been difficult for the Hindu community to be able to worship and to engage in. They have a small shack where they've been trying to worship for all of this time. And so, but in general, we haven't seen, obviously this Eid and during COVID, the ability to gather, the ability to obtain meat as part of Eid has been very, very difficult. And so we see those kinds of concerns continuing, but we haven't seen obviously the levels of persecution that we saw from when those communities, Muslim communities, were living in Burma, and certainly not the kind of persecution that we see in the internally displaced camps. And so the camps where people are internally displaced. And so this might be, I mean, in this bizarre, strange way, that the camps may be one of the places in which there is a space to preserve the religious worship, the culture, and the heritage of the Rohingya, given that there are 3 million Rohingya around the world and the largest population in Cox's Bazar. So that's one part of it. I think as the other my fellow panelists talked about, and as Sharifah really documented in so many ways, how a religious practice continues to be difficult for women and for girls, and to think about what happens when you don't have a place that you can leave to. So if you're experiencing persecution and are facing challenges that may come out of religious practice for women and girls, that there's no real way to get away from that. And we're seeing the impact of that in all kinds of ways. I met with a lot of young girls and women who really felt trapped about their options in terms of marriage, in terms of the ways in which they could, whether they were able to get an education, whether they were able to feel like they had freedoms to move or to be part of community, and even within the camps. And I think those are things that are only exacerbated by what's happening in throughout the camps now, and obviously with COVID. And so all of that is the basis and the foundation of what we've been focused on, as has been already talked about. The way in which Burma has, and frankly, India and other places in the region are looking to citizenship laws as a way to strip communities, religious communities, of their ability to get an education, to be employed, to move, to get basic services, human services, social services, health services. The long time effort to try and suggest that they don't have the documentation, or that they're somehow that the Rohingya are somehow stateless, is something that we have been really focused on, and held hearings back in March about the use of citizenship laws as a way to target communities and to, frankly, perpetrate genocide and crimes against humanity. And so that's another area that we continue to see as such it continues to be so important, because the question of what is home, and when I think of what is home and what are the ancestral lands that someone can go back to, is something that has obviously been continued to be such a huge issue. I do want to also note that we've raised a number of concerns about what's happening with Rohingya communities that have tried to go, for example, to Malaysia and to other ports, and have been and have not been able to, have been frankly stuck on the water, and have not been able to find a place to land. And when they have, in many countries, particularly during COVID, have been targets of even more intense hate and targeting and violence. And so we have raised those kinds of concerns about those communities, that there have been many who have died in those journeys, to try and get to safety, to try to get to a place that they can land and even have the opportunity to try and build something for themselves. And so I just want to end with what stays with me from, there are many things that stay with me from the time I spent last summer in the camps. And I think the one part that for some reason captures it for me is a conversation I was having with a family who, it was mango season last June, and all over Bangladesh and India and Burma, there were mangoes everywhere. And I think in some ways, thinking about the ration on food being basically lentils, rice, and oil, not much else for so long. But the thing that this family said to me was that where they in their land, in their homeland, in their ancestral lands in Rakhine State, they didn't want anything. They just wanted to go back. They didn't want anything else than the ability to work land, and just to be on their land. And they talked to me about the mango trees and the jackfruit trees, and they said, here we don't have any trees and we don't have any shade to protect us. And it was, at the time where, when you think about what it means to survive on the side of a mountain without trees, without any kind of protection from all of what is coming towards them, I just keep thinking about that as a way in which I think about all of the ways in which they are living without protections and without the kind of ability to to work and build the land and to build the soil and enrich it beneath their feet. So I'll just end with that. But I'm happy to talk about any pieces of it. And I just wanted to thank my fellow panelists for the extraordinary way in which you laid out so much of what's happening right now. So thank you.
No, thank you so much for saying that. I never even thought about the mango trees and missing such simple things as like the normal fruits that you're used to on a regular basis seasonally. There are some questions coming in, and there are some questions I have myself, but some of these questions are some questions I would have asked myself. So I'll start with Dr. Mishari. If you can answer this one. One of these questions was, I'd like to know how Rohingya refugee children have been coping with the mental and physical impacts of the trauma of the 2017 crackdown in Myanmar's northern Rakhine state, and from being stuck in displacement camps in Bangladesh for the past 3 years with little prospect of getting out. Have they been receiving adequate physical and mental health treatment, especially amid efforts in the camps to contain the spread of COVID-19 virus?
Thank you for this really important question. And I don't think you need to be an expert on medicine or mental health or even on refugee health to imagine what it's like to experience the trauma that you experienced and that led you to flee, and then arrive in a situation where hundreds and thousands of people live on the hills in muddy conditions in small tents. And so there's always, when we talk about forced migrants, especially this group, there's always a huge issue of mental health that permeates throughout the ages and is something that doesn't stop. The trauma begins maybe in their homeland, but the trauma continues. And we heard some stories about human trafficking, and it's just generally, it's very, very hard. But I think the main issue that I wanted to say is oftentimes in these situations, and we've seen that in Cox's Bazar in the various camps, and we're documenting it now through our study, is that mental health is often provided in silos. There's hardly ever any kind of coordination of care from, you either go to a mental health care clinic or you go to a physical clinic, and there's not a lot of coordination. People are working in silos, the health professionals. There's also a huge stigma, regardless of where in the world you are, about mental health. And more importantly, what is mental health or mental or lack of it for different cultures is incredibly different. Mental health is a culturally mediated condition. And so if something that I would see and I say, oh, this is 100% PTSD, is not necessarily how people would experience this in their family members, on their own, or even local health professionals in Bangladesh. So this is all to say that yes, mental health is an enormous issue that has been, and mental health conditions are enormously burdensome in the Rohingya population in Cox's Bazar. Yes, there are services. No, they're not always coordinated. And don't forget that UNICEF is there and multiple multilateral organizations, but the coordination has been an issue. And lastly, COVID came and everything is on hold right now. And in and of itself, because of COVID, the camps have been closed, the movement has been stopped and or suspended or limited in multiple ways. Oftentimes mental health professionals and other clinicians are not able to go into the camps, and you're not allowed to leave. So even for those who were receiving some services, everything right now is on hold, not to mention the stress of COVID in and of itself and being confined, which I think all of us around the world have experienced, regardless of where we are, but particularly in the context of a refugee camp. So this is a long answer to say we recognize it, people are working towards it, but there's certainly not an ideal situation.
Can I just add, they certainly copy everything that Dr. Mishori just said. I do also just want to talk a little bit about education. Obviously, there are not teachers going into the camps right now. Even during, when I was there last year, I heard from a lot of children that their education was around 2 hours a day, that there was a lot of debate about, even with the Bangladeshi government, about what could be taught in those 2 hours. And frankly, a lot of times those 2 hours were not were about character education. We're not really on the kind of skills we want young children to be learning. And so there were extraordinary lengths being taken by a number of the women that I met with to try and actually find some alternate ways to educate their children and to get tutors and to find a way in which to bring education to children who are already traumatized. And I did want to just to give you a sense of, if I can do it easily, I just want to give you one picture of the area where all the children play in part of a camp, just to give a sense of what that looks like. This is from last year. Let me see if I can actually share my screen in any way easily. And if I can't, I don't know if I can, let's see. So that, if you can see it, is a picture of the main area in which children play, and that's what it is, right? And so there's nothing else there. And I think to think about children trying to grow up and play, and that's where they spend most of their time for 3 years already is just something for all of us to think about how you could address some of the mental health trauma, educational, social, emotional needs of children. I'm a civil rights lawyer for kids, and so I think a lot about these issues. And this is, this was. I also went to a lot of the school buildings that there were a number of them, but they were not equipped with much more than this. So so thank you for that.
No, thank you for that image. I have to be honest, as a mother living in the United States and with my children living in the United States, I think we don't understand the quality of the lifestyle that these camps have. It's very hard for us to imagine those kind of images unless we actually see them. And that's the only way we're going to understand it. Thank you for sharing that with us. So I do have a question for Sharifah. I was wondering if you could share with us some of your perspective on, I know in Malaysia, as a host community for these refugees, it was positive in the beginning, but there has been a anti-Rohingya backlash that's been happening. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Coming from Malaysia, spending 21 years there, I didn't expect what is happening towards Rohingya for the moment. It's already a lot for everyone because of the COVID. On top of that, the hate campaign, the xenophobia treatment towards Rohingya, is there, and that's actually really puts people lives in like terrible situation. Is putting their life in really in a they are feeling very insecure due to that. These people get their jobs, they get evicted from their jobs, evicted from their house, and they are not able to. I mean, there are people call me and say that, oh sister, I supposed to return home, go back to work after they allowed them to go back, after the MCO. And then and he was so happy, he called me, and then after an hour, he received another call from the same employee, and then say that, oh, are you Rohingya? And then he said yes, and then he asked, do you have your UNHCR card? And he said yes, and he's like, okay, then don't come to the work anymore. So it's crazy. People are afraid to hire Rohingya. I mean, they are not even recognized, but these people who live in daily wages, depend on this already, like no job for them. Their landlord, been already chasing them out from the house. There are many families that I know, especially in Kelang Valley, they already get evicted from the house. They're already in the street. It's hard to imagine their lives over there. And I also heard story of abuses that happen to the people, to the Rohingya community. There is an old man, I heard that there is a video got viral in the WhatsApp groups where he was just collecting scrap metals, and there is some group of Malay young boys came and push him to the fire while he was doing some cleaning over there, and just like that. So it's horrible that what's happening. And there is also a misconception about Rohingya in the country, thinking that Rohingya are demanding for citizenships, demanding for equal, rights in the country and stuff like that, which is not true. And I believe that whatever happening is, I think, is a big agenda behind it. Is a political agenda. Whatever it is, whoever get benefit out of it, but the effect of these xenophobia attacks, I think, will remain. There in the Rohingya community, there are women, who call me and text me and saying that, I'm feeling the same, what I used to face in Myanmar. I'm not feeling, I don't feel any more safe, to be here. I'm afraid. And because of this xenophobia attack as well, Rohingya there are refugees, including mostly Rohingya, have been arrested and put in detention camp, with COVID and stuff like that. So it is horrible. It is very heartbreaking, and I mean, it's hard. It's just even me being so apart. I'm not more in Malaysia. But the effect is too much, in a person. I have to take a break for 2 months. I just, be quiet from as much as possible from my social media, because it just affect me so much. And imagine people in the ground who have to face this thing in daily basis. They have nowhere to go. There is no protection for them. There's nobody who will stand up for them, and it's hard. But yes, I'm not also forget of mentioning that there are very nice people, in Malaysia, very kind, humble Malays that coming in front, even though they get attacked by their same fellow citizen for standing up for the Rohingya refugees. And we are grateful for those people. We are grateful, for all the helps that we receive. And yeah, it just, I think it's sad. The situation should calm down, and the government should interfere in this, solving these situations, because in the end, I think we need to know that we are the survivors of genocide. It is not easy for us to, it is not possible for us to return home for now, and we want to be allowed to be give us a space, a shelter, while we able to return home, or there's other alternative ways, for resettlement or any other solutions while we are in the country. Allow us to contribute, like I mentioned earlier. And it's similar with the refugees in Bangladesh. So we don't want to be seen as burden. We don't want to be seen as a threat, or we don't want to see we see negatives. Allow us to contribute, and I think that is the and I think it's also a responsibility of the all human beings, in fellow citizens. We are not asking much, but yeah. So the xenophobia attacks towards Rohingya, especially in Malaysia, it is very worrying, and it is there. It is the situation in the ground is very bad, and nobody can even talk about it. And everyone get attacks, on social media. We getting attacked. We getting a lot of hate. Comments and messages and dirty things and stuff. So yeah, just hoping for the best, and I hope the government really take action on this and try to do something with this.
No, thank you so much. I think you made a great point. Refugees don't want to be seen as a burden. They want to participate in society and contribute. Sometimes we forget that, I think, as governments and people in the areas that are affected. I do have a couple of questions for Commissioner Anurimah from our own Imam Malik Mujahid. There's 2 questions. He said, did you meet the Rohingya imams during your trip, and what do they say about the religious freedom? That's the first question. And the second question is that he had seen when he visited the Hindu camps that they were being provided with vegetarian diet, and he took photos of their worship hut. And he felt that the Bangladeshi government, was properly taking care of the Hindu refugees. And what was your impression for that? If you can take a couple of minutes to answer those two questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. So with regards to the religious, to meeting with the imams, we did not meet with the imams in Cox's Bazar. I think there were a number, and perhaps Commissioner Menza, I don't think she talked about it this morning. I tried to be on in terms of whether she was able to meet with any of the imams in the camps themselves. We went separately to Cox's Bazar. So I am not. I don't believe that we had a chance to do that last June. Our a delegation from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom went the year before, and what I understood from their visit is that their understanding from the imams was generally positive in terms of having, again, space to worship materials, and that there were imams there to support the community in worship. I don't know if that has changed. Obviously, much changes all the time, and so I don't mean to suggest that that continues now, but I have not heard something different from those that we have talked to. Obviously, as mentioned before, COVID and the continued years of being in the camps is going to have a toll on in many ways in terms of religious worship, which is whether or not you have the ability to gather, whether or not you have the resources to try and make sure that you're holding times of celebration and times of worship in a way that is in accordance with the way in which you would want to celebrate those times. And so those are things that I think continue to be of concern. With regards to the Hindu camp, I agree with you that I don't think there's significant concerns about how Hindus have been treated compared to the Rohingya Muslims that are in the larger camps. I would say that the Hindu camp is quite small. And for that reason, I have a picture that I could share that's just basically the entirety of it in one picture. And so in some ways, the concerns are not just that the worship space is something that is a hut or shack that is not a space, the kind of space that they would want to be able to worship in, but also that some of the services and frankly, the space that comes with being even in a larger camp is something that the Hindus have not had, have 400 people in a smaller space. And so things like health services, being able to access some of those, the education services, there are schools obviously in the Hindu camp, but they're different than, they're going to be different in terms of time and space and kind than in the larger camps. And so I think those are the kinds of things that have been coming up. In general, I think people have had a vegetarian diet throughout the Rohingya camps because it's difficult. There are, obviously ways in which you can procure meat, but that has been very hard for anyone to do. So people have been restricted so significantly in what they're able to eat and access in terms of rations. So that has not been as much, it hasn't been a difference in that way. But I do think just the smaller space of the Hindu camp. And I wanted to mention it because I think it's important for people to recognize that there are different religious faiths and communities, even if they're small, they're certainly present within those that are in Cox's Bazar and who had to flee Burma.
Thank you. I believe that basically from what I'm understanding, is that this issue is multicultural and multi-religious. It's not only based on just Muslims or just a particular ethnicity or religion. I do have a question for Dr. Mishori, and
I do want to. Go ahead. Sorry. One quick thing on that. I do want to be very clear, though. I mean, it is our belief and understanding, and what we have seen documented, that what we see in terms of the targeting of the Rohingya is a religious issue. We are seeing this from Buddhist leaders and even Buddhist religious leaders in Burma in terms of how the community has been targeted. So I don't mean to suggest that the targeting is something that has. I think in part what happened is that a number of Hindus, for example, got swept up with everybody else, right? And so I just want to be clear on that I do think in many ways, what we're seeing in the region is the targeting of Muslims in a number of different ways.
Thank you for clarifying that, because I believe that that's a very critical thing to clarify, especially when there are Hindus, like you said, that are being swept up. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge that the majority that is feeling this, and for what reason and for what purpose. So thank you for that. Exactly. Dr. Mishari, something I wanted to ask about after reading your bio and your expertise, and since we have a woman panelist, we've known that a lot of women have suffered from this genocide, and your expertise is in sexual assault, torture. What, in terms of your experience, does this particular Burma issue fall under? Is this one of the worst you've seen? Where does it lie? What is the, kind of process that women can heal from this? What are the avenues that they can heal from this? From your expertise, what do you have to share with us? I know we hear a lot of statistics, but at the same time, I just want to place it. Where should we be placing this? How concerned should we be about this? Is it one of those light concerns that only a few percentages have experienced? Is it a majority? How much of healing do these people need? How much support do these people need? What are we looking at in terms of the spectrum of where this lies?
Thank you. Well, of course, sexual violence is and has been a weapon of war for centuries. So this is not new. This every time there's a place with conflict, we anticipate that that's what would happen. You asked me how to, are we able to measure it? It's very difficult to measure it for a variety of reasons. First of all, there's a lot of stigma associated with sexual violence and rape that's related to sexual trauma or sexual violence. And so it's not a situation where you're conducting a survey and going to women and saying, hey, were you raped? Or hey, can you tell us what's happened? It requires a great level of training to be able to elicit this kind of these kinds of narratives. And a lot of women don't want to talk about it because it's incredibly traumatic. So every time we talk about sexual violence and rape in the context of conflict, we need to know that what we're getting is an undercounting. I also want to emphasize that sexual violence is not only directed at women, it's also directed at men and boys. And so this is, if you're thinking about stigma related to women, that's triple or quadruple that. And this is the situation with eliciting these kinds of narratives about sexual violence for men. One thing that I do know, and I've been working on these issues around the world and in all continents, well, maybe not in Antarctica, but is that the humans are incredibly resilient. Women rebuild their lives, girls often rebuild their lives, and that's what I personally take from my encounters with people who have who are survivors of sexual violence. Is it is possible to rebuild both spiritually and emotionally and psychologically and physically. And I can't say that the situation for the Rohingyas is worse than the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo or in Syria or in Bosnia. For the individual, it doesn't matter that it happened 20 years ago in Bosnia, or it doesn't happen that it's happening right now in the Congo. It doesn't matter. It's about them and their community and the impact on the community at large. So in that regard, I would urge people not to try to compare. It's horrible when it happens to an individual, and it's horrible when it happens to a community, and it's horrible when it happens to population. No question this is happening. It's no question. We're trying to document it. I think when we talk about people arriving in refugee camps, oftentimes the first thing that you want to talk about and you want to address is food, shelter, healthcare, and this sort of falls through the cracks. And it's an issue that needs to be addressed right away when situations like that happen. Again, livelihood and being alive sometimes takes precedent, and it should take precedent, but we shouldn't forget the documentation of sexual violence. And then we can't wait 6 months, 3 years 10 years to document it, although it's never too late, especially if we want to put the survivor at the center and talk about reparations, talk about support, mental health support, physical health support, economic support. Sexual violence doesn't just affect the individuals, it affects the whole community, it affects the family because of stigma, because of sometimes repercussions for the survivors themselves or for the victims themselves of being a rape victim, to children who are born through rape, certainly huge repercussions in the community. So it's a very, unfortunately, it's a very complicated situation, regardless of where you are in the world. But we have certainly seen that done in a systematic way among the Rohingya, and this is what we're documenting, not just us, but multiple human rights organizations. So I think the fact that it's happened to multiple hundreds, if not thousands of women, and in a systematic way, in a way where we can create and report and document patterns, to me, that's a sign that is some sort of a strategy of the conflict, and that needs to be prosecuted and needs to be addressed in some sort of criminal proceedings through the ICC or the ICJ, and talk about tribunals that address this issue as one of the main features of what's been happening in Burma and Myanmar, and leading to people fleeing all over the region, and specifically to Bangladesh.
No, thank you. Yes, I agree. After these kind of trauma, I believe there's a lot more healing and more consequences than we can think of. So there's a question that I'd like to ask each one of you, since with your expertise, you might have a different perspective on this particular question. What kind of advocacy work should be concerned with communities here to focus on regarding refugee and IDP aid? So if we can just go down the list, because each one of you with your expertise may have a different answer to this particular question. So Commissioner, if you could start and share with us, what kind of advocacy work can we do here?
I think there's a number of places for advocacy work. Some of it's going to feel, some of the things I'm going to say are going to feel more technical, but I think they may have ramifications that are really important. For example, the push to make sure that across the board, the way in which the U.S. and other governments talk about and consider what's happening in Rohingya is as genocide and not as ethnic cleansing, which as the panel discussed this morning, we'll have, there's a question about what the ramifications of that are. It certainly raises the focus and some of the resources that may be available to communities, and an understanding of what it is that has been endured, including as Dr. Mishori just talked about, in terms of sexual violence as part of a significant tool of genocide. So I think that's one piece of this, and that has been a many year long conversation and battle. And so I should probably not have said it first, because I don't know if it's the place it's hard for me to say if that's a place to put a priority. One of the things that's really concerning is that there's been a lot of aid that has gone to the Rohingya community over the years, and how to sustain that when we don't seem to have a light or a sense of where it is and where and when this will end in terms of those who are in the camps. And I think it's in a safe place for the hundreds of thousands of those who are in Cox's Bazar and elsewhere to be able to go. And so without that, and without the ability to do the basic things of people want to work, they want to contribute, they want to be able to as Dr. Mishori said, to exercise their resilience and to build their lives differently. And without that, that place and that hope for where it is that that can happen, I think trying to figure out how it is that these communities can survive and sustain. And I was looking at I don't know this area as well as some of the others on this in this discussion, but certainly looking at everything from nutrition to the ways in which healthcare needs and education needs are playing out is something that I think is an acute issue, and trying to advocate obviously for the world to recognize where we are in terms of refugee populations globally, which is at its highest levels, and then obviously with COVID, all of the challenges that come with that. And so to not have the Rohingya be something that was people think of as a community that was persecuted, but that is in the past. That's certainly so many ways in which it's the current, and it is the current for all of those who all the families and community and the community that is in Cox's Bazar. And so I think that's another place. Third is as the commission, as we have done and we will continue to do, is to put pressure on Burma to make sure that those officials who have engaged in the kind of religious persecution and hate, that those officials are sanctioned. We had some of those sanctions last year. That we continue to raise the ways in which that there are consequences. And we hope will continue to be consequences to governments who are targeting communities in this way. And so I think those are some of the places, and obviously to continue to advocate for aid. I unfortunately don't have much faith in the United States as the place in where I reside to take on more refugees at this point, and I hope that changes. And that's something that we had pushed for on the Commission as well. And so the United States as a place that refugees have been able to come to has been significantly limited in the last couple of years, and was not good to begin with. So I think it's a continued place for us to advocate for. And then lastly, I'd say for those who I think sometimes there's not an understanding that there are over 100,000, if not way more, people who are internally displaced within Burma, and face a whole range of challenges, including even being able to access when people are sick, when they are hurt, when they are in pain, to be able to access services and to get out, to get to those services. We've seen, a number of really difficult examples in that context. And so I think that's another place where we would want to continue to highlight the fact that what is going on with Rohingya, not only in Cox's Bazar, but frankly, around the world and in Burma as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Sharifah, if you could share, what could we do as communities here to help the refugees in this situation?
Yes, I think we can do a lot. Like I said, it takes a wills, and there is always a way. There is there are many misconceptions about Rohingya. There is a lot of misunderstandings about Rohingya still, and I think we can do as simple as that. Advocate for that. The real situations of the Rohingya, and when we talk about all this situation, example, the rapes that happen towards the Rohingya females. People don't see it in a clear picture. They seem that, oh, this is maybe a small thing, but it does affect everyone. And when we talk about the situations about the Rohingya or even the rape, it's not similar like other community in the world that facing kind of similar situations. Rohingya situations totally I think is different. And sorry, it is very difficult to go through when you are facing like example myself. I was born without any human rights, and people give me names by names, Kala to refugee to this and that. So they always give me names as a troublemaker and stuff like that. I think it is pain to carry those words, to see this kind of the hopelessness in children's eyes, where they don't have education, the very basic rights for a child, which is education. They don't access that. I think it is very painful. So there is a lot of way, we as even forget about the countries, forget about the big NGOs. I think we ourselves can, come to the ground, with a unique way of approaching ourselves, our neighbors, about what is Rohingya, what they are facing, and there are many people still don't understand the suffering and the struggles of Rohingya, and we ourselves contributing our time, to educate these Rohingya themselves, empower our people. There are a lot of youth in Bangladesh camp that I've seen that so eager, for the education. They want to be recognized. They want to have the equal access, at least, for the education. And I think it is possible to do. Like in my organization in Malaysia, currently empowering women to educate them. There is a lack of job opportunities, so we are giving them opportunity to work from the home, and make them financially independent, which solve a lot of problem in the family and the society as well. So this kind of unique way of empowering each other, I think, and can be implemented. And I think we Rohingya, especially from Bangladesh camp and around the world in Myanmar, I think we are kind of tired of hearings that, oh, there's a discussion going on, there's a advocacy going on. I mean, it is important, but we have been suffering for so long, and the world get to know it since 2012. And I think the action have to be, there should be at least some action. It is very frustrating and heartbreaking to see that there's no action. It breaks my heart, to imagine the situation of Rohingya in the camp, every day waiting to hear good news, whether they can return home, but yet they have to depend on rations, and on top of that, things that happen like xenophobia attacks, internet bans, and there are many more. So I think the action have to be implemented. Being as a Rohingya, we just want to see action, even though it's small action.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. I agree with you. Thank you for sharing some of your personal experience when you were sharing some of to enlighten us with some of the issues that we need to pay attention to. Dr. Mishori, could you share with us what is the best way for us to advocate here?
I think that I echo what my co-panelists have said in the last 10 minutes or so, but I think one of the main issues is to not let the story of the Rohingyas, whether they're in Myanmar still or in Bangladesh or in Malaysia or elsewhere, disappear from the headlines. And it is critical that we keep on trying in many directions. So for us at Physicians for Human Rights, that means continuing to collect data and continuing to kind of probe and run investigations about what's going on. For others, it may mean holding events like that to kind of get the public to understand what's going on. It means working with governments to enact all kinds of policies and perhaps embargoes and other economic or other limitations against the government. It means bugging the government of Myanmar and not letting go, continuing to say, there's something that you have to do. You have to allow people to come and inspect. You have to allow people in the country. You have to allow human rights investigators and UN officials into the country. And of course, working with multilateral organizations within the International Criminal Court, with the with the ICFJ, I'm mixing my the letters here, but I think ultimately, and especially now with a global crisis happening with COVID, it's very easy, and every country is kind of clamping down and all the borders are closed, and it is incredibly difficult to conduct such investigations and get people interested. It's almost impossible to get people to visit Bangladesh right now if you're not from, even from within Bangladesh to visit Cox's Bazar, let alone Burma and all of these areas. So these are times that are particularly sensitive and where we anticipate that more human rights violations are going to occur. So I think we need to quadruple our efforts right now because of what's happening globally with COVID to make sure that things are not happening that we're never going to hear about because we can't travel. We need to think about creative ways of communicating with people on their ground to identify what's happening, for them to document what's happening. Tell us, again, especially in the context of COVID, are they not getting healthcare? Are they being discriminated against? Are they not getting the services that other members of the same country are getting in terms of COVID prevention, and is anything intensifying because supposedly nobody can see, nobody can hear, and nobody can get there because of the global crisis. So I think we're in a particularly vulnerable situation, and we need to continue, trying in all different directions, which is why it's great to bring a coalition of people. It's Physicians for Human Rights. We're going to continue to do what we can in terms of documenting, but other people maybe have more of a leverage with governments, from Canada to the Gambia, who have been leaders on this at the moment, to continue and pressure the government of Myanmar and international human rights and international criminal bodies who may be able to help with accountability.
No, thank you. This is why I think I was so excited about this panelist, because all three of you come from each of those perspectives that you just spoke about. We need to act in terms of civil rights through law. We need to understand and educate, like Sharifah was talking about the issues, and then also take concern about our next generation and the generation that's here, that's going through all this trauma, about their physical and mental safety and health. So I believe that, exactly what you had said, accountability on all these fronts. We only have about a few minutes left, so I wanted to give a couple minutes and ask Sharifah a question, because we have just talked about something so serious: genocide, trauma, sexual assault, women's needs. I'd like to end with a little bit of some hope. And I know, Sharifah, your organization and what you have been involved in, they organize classes for consisting women of general education and building some leaders. Is there a story you could share with us, just even 2 minutes, of a woman, a successful story, so that we all can leave here thinking, okay, there is some progress, there is some healing, there is some positivity coming out of all this, unhappiness. And honestly, when you mentioned 9 years old and that you had heard from a 9-year-old girl, I have to be honest with you, as a mother, as a parent, which I'm sure some of our viewers and listeners all have a similar situation, my stomach has not been feeling well since you said that. So I'd like to actually hear something positive. If you can share with us just a simple 1 minute to 2 minutes of a great story.
Yep, thank you. Actually, when I think about this, I'm very, very happy. When I started in this ground, it was a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles, and it seemed kind of impossible to empower a woman, to build women leaderships in our community. But now I'm just so happy when thinking about is that from our organization, there are many, women from different backgrounds, who've been trafficked, who never been to school, who've been born as a refugee, who is single mothers. All these women come together, becoming a beautiful, they are. Like example, there are many stories, but I would like to share about one of this lady. She just, her name is Laila. She is a single mother. She never been to school, and she have gone through so much in her life, with her marriage, with her, being a refugee, being a female in Myanmar, being trafficked, all these things. She never imagined when I talked to her that, you can be something, you can be a leader, you can be the voice. And today, just about 1-2 weeks ago, a few days ago, she came out in a Rohingya, news channel, speaking about the problem in the society, being a voices of other women. I think that's very powerful. It's just give me a goosebump and happiness, thinking about all these women, who coming forward, do amazing work. When I leaving Malaysia, and I have a lot of guilt, what will happen, a lot of worried. But these women are actually, mashallah, they are doing amazing job. They have been carrying the work, so effectively. They become a strong in a group. They become a strong in a voice. They are leading each other. They are leading the organization. They're leading their families. They're becoming a best role model for their daughters, for their children, of course, for the community and for the society. So it is amazing. And they also bring together their husband, their family, in this work. So it is amazing. And like, that's why I say there is we have to give our fundings also, in empowering people in the ground, because I believe, we have to teach everyone how to catch a fish rather than making them depend on a fish forever, so that we can choose our own fish and we eat whichever way we want to eat. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to give the other two panelists a couple of minutes to share some thoughts with us that you would want to share with our audience. If we have not asked any questions, if there was something you would like to leave us with, some golden tidbits, Dr. Mishori, if you could start.
Thank you. I mean, I want to, again, echo what Sharifah was saying, and I think the future is female. There's just, women and girls are amazing. We need to empower them. We need to give them the tools to succeed, and they will lead us out of really horrible situations. And I think, everybody here on this panel has proven in one way or another that the power of women, the power of women's voices, the powers of women's anger, and where that can lead us. And so I want to see people like Sharifah and others be empowered and be supported, so they, and of course, it's women from the countries and the communities who are most affected who should be given all of these tools, and our support from the United States and other states, countries in the global north. So I thank you for everything that you're doing and for your community, and I want to basically be there to help, and I think that's our role from the global north.
Thank you. And our last panelist to give us her impressions of wrapping up today, Commissioner, can you share with us some tidbits that you would like to leave our audience with?
I'm going to sound the same note, which is that invest, fund, support women and girls. That is true for the Rohingya. It's true, I think, in so many of the places we're seeing the results of violence and conflict and brutality. And I think there are obviously legal and other processes going on with regards to the Rohingya around the world in the ICJ and the International Criminal Court, and also in other countries that have looked at what's happening in Burma and with the Rohingya. And I think really just having this be something that, as everyone has said, continues to be front of mind, even given all that's going on in the world. That if we can empower women and girls in these communities, if we can empower the Rohingya worldwide, I think it will be so important in terms of how it is that we create and build what we are looking for, which is communities where people of different religions, different backgrounds, different experiences, different wisdoms can come together and create and build and grow what's on the soil. And so I think that's where I leave it, which is where my fellow discussants have so powerfully led us to. So thank you.
No, thank you all of you for joining. I have to be honest, I'm going to wrap up as a moderator, but I have heard so much, statistics and information around this issue. But, with the information that you all have shared with the different perspectives, it gave me a very well-rounded view of this issue. And I would like to thank all of you. I hope all of you work together, since I think each one of you has represented the different areas that all need to be addressed to actually have a working solution for this particular problem. If there's anything else, I'd like to also thank Justice for All for putting this together and getting the expert panelists that we had the pleasure of meeting today. And I'd like to thank all of the audience who spent a Sunday afternoon with us educating themselves on a very important topic. And if there's any other questions, please contact Justice for All. Look it up on www.justiceforall.org on the website. Look up and see how you can help and advocate, and take all the advice that you've taken from our panelists today. Contact your local officials, learn about this particular issue, educate yourself, and as Dr. Mishari said, help in terms of giving these refugees a chance to get some mental and physical health help. So I thank you all, and have a great Sunday afternoon, and to all our audience too.
And thank you, everyone. This is Adam Carroll from Justice for All. Thank you so much, Asima, and to all the panelists for a very comprehensive and multidimensional discussion of refugees and displaced people, and also women's needs and women's leadership. I think it's worth also seeing this panel again, and it will be available. It could be a seminar and be shared widely. I think very useful. So going forward, half an hour from now, we have the third panel, which I'll be moderating, about partnership building and solidarity. And we'll be placing the card up there. So please, same link, same place. We'll see you in half an hour.